Marcus Hartwell had always believed he was untouchable. Standing in the marble-floored lobby of the county courthouse, he adjusted his Rolex and smirked at his reflection in the polished brass directory. 10 years ago, he'd walked out of his marriage to Claire with everything: the house, the cars, his consulting business, and his dignity intact. She'd gotten the old sedan and their daughter Emma on weekends. Now, at 52, with his third startup failing and creditors circling, Marcus had concocted what he considered a brilliant plan. Claire had always been the soft-hearted one, living in that modest apartment, working her quiet bookkeeper job. She'd never fought him in the divorce, never asked for what she deserved. That made her the perfect target. Mr. Hartwell? His lawyer, Jeff Sterling, appeared beside him, leather briefcase gleaming. Ready to make history? Suing your ex-wife for alimony. It's unconventional, but with the right spin about her hidden assets and your recent financial hardship. Marcus nodded, straightening his tie. He'd rehearsed his performance. The struggling entrepreneur, the victim of a vindictive ex who'd concealed wealth during their marriage. He'd even manufactured evidence, doctored emails suggesting Claire had a secret inheritance, anonymous tips about offshore accounts. It was all fabrication, but Marcus had learned long ago that perception mattered more than truth. The courtroom was smaller than he'd expected, intimate in a way that made his skin prickle. Judge Patricia Reeves presided, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Claire sat at the defendant's table with a court-appointed attorney, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, and when their eyes met across the room, Marcus saw something that unsettled him. Not fear, but a quiet, unshakable calm. "Your Honor," Jeff began, his voice smooth as silk, "my client comes before you today seeking justice." During their marriage, Marcus Hartwell was the primary breadwinner, building businesses while Ms. Claire Hartwell managed their home. Since their divorce, my client has fallen on difficult times. Through no fault of his own, I'm sure, Judge Reeves interjected dryly. Jeff cleared his throat. Meanwhile, evidence suggests Ms. Hartwell has been living well beyond her declared means. We believe she concealed assets during the divorce proceedings and now, in fairness, she should provide support to her former spouse during his time of need. Marcus watched Claire's face. She didn't flinch, didn't react. That calm was infuriating. Judge Reeves turned to Claire's attorney. "Does your client wish to respond?" The young public defender stood, but before he could speak, Claire touched his arm and rose herself. "Your Honor, if I may." The judge nodded. Claire's voice was steady, clearer than Marcus remembered. "I'd like to submit my financial records for the court's review. Complete transparency. Every bank statement, every account, every penny." Marcus felt a cold finger trace down his spine. Something was wrong. Judge Reeves accepted the manila folder from Claire's attorney, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she began examining the documents. The courtroom fell silent except for the whisper of turning pages. Marcus shifted in his seat, Jeff leaning close to whisper, "This is perfect. Whatever she shows will either prove she's broke, making our case moot, but at least we tried, or show she's been hiding money." But as the minutes stretched on, Judge Reeves's expression shifted. Her eyebrows rose. She flipped back to a previous page, then forward again. Finally, she looked up, not at Claire, but at Marcus. "Mr. Hartwell, your petition states that you've experienced significant financial hardship since 2020. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus replied smoothly. "My consulting firm collapsed during the pandemic, and I've been struggling too." "And yet," the judge interrupted, her voice sharp as a scalpel, "you purchased a luxury condominium in Miami last year for $2.3 million. Cash purchase." The blood drained from Marcus's face. Jeff stood abruptly. "Your Honor, I'm not sure where that information." "I'm not finished." Judge Reeves's gaze could have cut glass. "Ms. Hartwell's bank statements show a modest savings account with approximately $47,000. Money she's saved over 10 years working overtime as a senior accountant, not a bookkeeper, as Mr. Hartwell claimed. However, what's far more interesting is what else came with these statements." She pulled out another set of documents, these looking official, stamped with government seals. "Ms. Hartwell works for Morrison & Associates, a forensic accounting firm. In her professional capacity, She was asked to review financial irregularities in several business entities. One of those entities was Hartwell Consulting, LLC. Marcus's throat went dry. The courtroom suddenly felt airless. It appears, Mr. Hartwell, that during your marriage and continuing after your divorce, you've been operating an elaborate tax fraud scheme. You've hidden income in shell corporations, falsified business expenses, and moved money through cryptocurrency accounts to avoid detection. The IRS has been building a case for 18 months. This is preposterous. Marcus shot to his feet. She's fabricating evidence to avoid paying me what I'm owed. Sit down. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. Marcus sat. Ms. Hartwell didn't fabricate anything. She was legally obligated to report her findings to the authorities. She did so 6 months ago, long before you filed this frivolous lawsuit. Claire finally looked at him, and Marcus saw it. Not triumph, but something sadder. Disappointment. Pity. Furthermore, Judge Reeves continued, your petition itself constitutes evidence of fraud. You've presented doctored emails and false financial statements to this court. Ms. Hartwell's attorney has provided the originals, obtained through a subpoena. They tell a very different story. Jeff was frantically packing his briefcase. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of any falsified documents. I believe you, Mr. Sterling. Your client, however, is another matter entirely. Judge Reeves removed her glasses, fixing Marcus with a stare that made him feel like an insect pinned to a board. Mr. Hartwell, I'm denying your petition for alimony. Furthermore, I'm issuing an immediate order to freeze all your known accounts pending investigation by the Internal Revenue Service and the State Attorney General's office. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. You can't, this is my life. Everything I've built, everything you've stolen, you mean. Judge Reeves's voice held contempt. Built on fraud, tax evasion, and the exploitation of legal systems. You came into my courtroom attempting to victimize your ex-wife a second time, having already cheated her out of her fair share in your divorce. Did you think she wouldn't notice the discrepancies? Did you think she'd stay silent forever? Marcus turned to Claire, anger boiling over. You vindictive bitch. You planned this. You waited until. Enough. The judge's gavel cracked down. Ms. Hartwell, would you like to speak? Claire stood slowly, her hands no longer folded but open at her sides. When she spoke, her voice carried across the courtroom with unexpected strength. Marcus, I didn't plan anything. I did my job. When Morrison and Associates assigned me to audit those companies, I had no idea one was yours. When I saw the patterns, the hidden accounts, the falsified records, I had a choice. Look the other way because you were once my husband, or do what was right. She paused, and Marcus saw moisture in her eyes, not from sadness, but from something harder to name. For 10 years, I told myself that letting you take everything in the divorce was worth it for peace. For Emma's sake. I convinced myself that your success meant she'd be taken care of, that you'd be the father she deserved. But you spent that money on yourself, on toys and properties, and impressing people who don't care about you. You missed her birthdays, her graduation, and when your house of cards started falling, you thought you could shake me down for more. Marcus wanted to speak, to defend himself, but his throat had closed. I don't hate you, Claire continued. I pity you. You had everything, a family, a daughter who loved you, a wife who believed in you, and you traded it all for money you didn't earn and respect you didn't deserve. Judge Reeves nodded slowly. Ms. Hartwell, I want to commend you for your integrity. This court finds no evidence of hidden assets on your part, and substantial evidence of fraud on Mr. Hartwell's part. The IRS will be notified of today's proceedings. Mr. Hartwell, you're advised to retain criminal counsel. As the bailiff approached, Marcus felt the walls closing in. His mind raced through decades of choices, each one seeming so clever at the time. The shortcut here, the creative accounting there. It had all seemed victimless. Dad, the voice came from the gallery. Emma stood there, 23 years old, her mother's calm eyes in his own face. She'd been watching the entire proceeding. Emma, honey, this is all a misunderstanding. Stop. She held up a hand. Just stop lying. For once in your life, stop. She walked to her mother's side, putting an arm around Claire's shoulders. The two of them stood together, unified in a way that made Marcus realize what he'd truly lost. Not the money, not the properties. Them. His family. The only thing that had ever been real. Outside the courthouse an hour later, Claire and Emma sat on a bench in the autumn sunshine. The legal proceedings would continue for months, maybe years. Marcus would face consequences, finally. But that wasn't what mattered most. "Are you okay, Mom?" Emma asked. Claire thought about the question. For 10 years, she'd lived small, afraid to take up space, convinced that her worth was measured by her silence. She'd worked overtime to save that $47,000, every dollar a tiny act of defiance, a promise to herself that she'd never be helpless again. When she'd discovered Marcus's fraud during that routine audit, she'd spent sleepless nights wrestling with what to do. The easy path was silence. The right path was harder. "I'm better than okay," Claire said finally. "I'm free." Emma smiled, squeezing her mother's hand. "He'll probably serve time, you know. They don't mess around with tax fraud." "I know." Claire didn't feel triumphant about it, just tired. Tired of carrying the weight of someone else's choices. But that's his journey now. We have ours. They sat in comfortable silence, watching people flow past, lawyers and defendants, families and friends, all caught in the machinery of justice. Some would find it, some wouldn't. But today, in this moment, Claire had found something more valuable than vindication. She'd found herself again. As they walked away from the courthouse, mother and daughter side by side, Claire felt the autumn wind carry away the last vestiges of the woman she'd pretended to be: small, silent, forgettable. In her place stood someone stronger, tempered by pain and isolation, but not broken by it. Behind them, in a holding cell, Marcus Hartwell finally understood what he'd lost. But understanding came too late, as it so often does for those who mistake power for strength and silence for weakness. The accounts were frozen. The investigation was beginning. And somewhere in a modest apartment, a simple blue dress hung in a closet beside a collection of professional suits. A woman's wardrobe, containing both who she'd had to be and who she was becoming. Justice, Claire had learned, wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and inevitable, like water wearing away stone, or truth emerging from years of shadow. Sometimes it was simply the courage to sign your name to a document and let the consequences unfold. And sometimes that was enough. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.